We are here, we're talking. Hey, everybody, welcome to 20Q 20 Questions with Interesting People, where we learn the origin stories of everyday superheroes in the LGBT community and friends. I am your host, the very handsome Tim Kirk, and our guest this time is raconteuse, bon vivant, and woman about town, Amy Waninger. Hi, Amy.
Hello, how are you?
Great. I hope you're doing well.
I am doing great, Tim.
Okay, that's terrific. I'm going to jump right into the first question. A bit about your background. Where are you originally from, and what was it like?
Well, I'm originally from southern Indiana in the middle of nowhere, a town called, believe it or not, Santa Claus, Indiana.
Really?
Really? Yes, Virginia,
Wow.
there is a Santa Claus. And what was it like? It was very white, very blue collar, and very rural. There were only, I think, in my whole county, there were only 20,000 people.
Wow. I have a friend of mine who is from Ames, Iowa, and he's first generation Indian born in America. And he told me similar stories. And one of my previous guests is Lauren Olson, who's a doctor, and he's from Des Moines. So the Midwestern connection is a little strange. Everyone has a story of being, in these little pockets of the Midwest. And I think they were a little bit more suburban. You sound
Mhm.
as if Santa Claus seems as a little tiny town of 20,000 people.
20,000 in the whole county. I think the town of Santa Claus, when I lived there, was less than 3,000. In fact, the four towns that surrounded where I grew up, I didn't live in a town, and the four towns that surrounded my childhood home, all four of them combined were still less than, I think, 7,000 people.
Wow. And there was
Tiny, tiny towns.
a bit of distance between either of them, all of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the bigger town of the four, it was a big deal when they got a subway and a stoplight, and that was my senior year of high school.
That was a
So
good. I can imagine. I was,
we were an hour from a shopping mall, a movie theater. I mean, anything. It was really.
I knew someone from Wyoming, and she told me that she was a real cowgirl, and she told me that because the people were so sparse, it was no problem at all to drive 100 miles to go for dinner.
Mhm.
And that when the boys, big boys, grown men, but the boys who were cowboys, would get together, they had so little interaction that the natural inclination for them was to be very aggressive toward each other,
Mhm.
and they just didn't know because they weren't used to the constant. They were on their own most of the time, and just having to interact with other people, and then they would honestly go to a trading post, and that was a big deal.
Mhm.
I can imagine that would be a. So how does it how did
So
it
so I wasn't like trading post rural, but it was pretty. We were pretty spread out.
okay. So based on that, this should be a really good questions. What life experience had the greatest impact on you?
Oh boy. I grew up an only child, and I really didn't know. I didn't know what people did when they went to college because I didn't know people who had gone to college really.
Yeah.
And so, I think going to college was a huge turning point for me because I was exposed for the first time to people from different places and people with different ideas and, people who didn't look like me or think like me. And it was the first time I really started to challenge, um, some of the things that I just took for granted.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Until you went to college, I can imagine it was I won't say isolated, but it was say maybe sheltered a little bit.
very sheltered.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Very.
something else. Uh, so, do you have anything else to say about that? I mean, your college experience, had I know it had a tremendous impact on you. Is there anything particular that stood out that is very distinct from that recollection?
Um, well, my freshman year of college, I went to a small school, small private school in Tennessee. And it was the first time I'd ever been called a Yankee. And it was the first time it had ever mattered to me where the Mason-Dixon line was. And yeah, and it never occurred to me that anybody would care about that. And so I felt so far outside of my normal. It was so different. And people would talk about, like, the other girls at my school would talk about like their coming out parties, and I thought they were putting me on. I thought they were like making fun of me from being from far away, right? Not far away, I was from Indiana, but and so like I would chuckle thinking like they were joking. And I remember one of the girls said, "What's so funny about that?" And it was like, "You had a coming out party?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh." And she goes, "Why is that funny?" And I still thinking she was kidding. I said, "Well, where I come from, people don't throw parties when their kids come out." And and I mean, I knew what she meant, but at the same time, like it was just so foreign to me. So,
That's interesting. My oldest sister went to college in Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and one of the big things, and that's surprisingly, it's only about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive from New York, and I think we were from Long Island, so it was maybe a little bit longer just to get through Long Island, through the city to get to Pennsylvania. But the big thing was a cotillion.
oh yeah.
And I never heard of a cotillion before in my life. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what that, but that was the social do of the year. So
Yes.
I could see that that would be something that it didn't particularly matter because my childhood, my teenage years were very, very much like Dazed and Confused. The same
Uh-huh.
atmosphere, the kids just like that, we looked like that, reacted like that. So there wasn't any formalities or anything. So this is it was a very distinct thing, and I think it was a much more formal experience, I would imagine, for
Oh
these
yeah.
kids.
Absolutely. And I just didn't, yeah, I didn't have that. It was so remote to me that that could even really exist.
Yeah,
That when they talked about it, I thought they were kidding.
I thought it was kind of I thought it was kind of fun, awkward, and like not common. And like no, it was very common outside of the
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So okay, that's pretty interesting. So what would you say to anyone interested in an aspect of your experience? Meaning, if someone wanted to explore an idea or prospective opportunity based on what you can tell them, what would be the main thing to encourage or discourage them?
Oh boy. I think that walk a mile in my shoes thing is a pretty good one. Like, if you wanted to understand what it was like to be in Southern Indiana, you would have to go there. And it's still the same way today that it was many, many years ago when I was growing up. All the same stuff is still there. All of, everything looks the same. People don't move in, people don't move out. So, occasionally they'll change the roads, but that's about it.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. There's a experience that my husband and I had. We took a train from New York to Montreal.
Mm,
And I would not recommend doing that again on Amtrak.
okay.
It's an hour at a plane and you're there. It's fine. This
Yeah.
was a bumpy ride, and it was about 9 hours. And every stop we went up, state New York, it was another 10 years in the past, and it hadn't changed.
Mm,
And you could see all the buildings had no new buildings. There was no nothing. Everything was exactly the same as it was when everything was originally built, and that was about it. And maybe there was, as you said, like maybe a subway or a new gas station or something. But essentially, the infrastructure of the town, the layout was exactly as it was when it was first built. So
hmm.
that's interesting. And imagine that must have some effect on your a desire, a sense of opportunity growing up. Because I think you think if everything just remains the same, I think some people are committed to keeping it that way, and
Hmm.
you might feel a little bit constricted. No?
I don't know that I ever felt constricted. I just didn't know what else was out there.
Okay.
And I think that was, it was when I realized in my 20s that people didn't go to business school so they could be bank tellers, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that.
Right.
And so, I thought engineering, like majoring in engineering was so you could drive a train, literally,
Okay. Yes.
like way late in my life, because that's the people around me, that's the jobs that they had. So I just thought that's all the jobs that existed. And so I really didn't understand that, you know, how business worked, or, that you could even travel outside the country, really. Like, it just didn't kind of have that, um I just didn't have that mentality growing up. And so when I was, let's see, I must have been about 30 years old, I guess. And a company that I worked for wanted to send me to India for a couple weeks. And I was like, I didn't even know that, like, it just never would have occurred to me in my entire life that I would ever go to India. I mean, that's as far away as you can get without coming back again.
Yes.
And, I was absolutely terrified because I was like, well, this is different. It was the first time I went to California, I was terrified because I grew up hearing that people from California are crazy and, like all this, like you just kind of get this thing. And I went to California. I'm like, well, they're just people. What was all that about? But it was sort of the same kind of thing. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so different and everybody's, how do you even do that? And I did, and I survived, and it was wonderful. Um,
That's
but
such a,
yeah, it's amazing what you don't know exists when you grow up in a small town like that.
it's funny. My folks lived in Florida for about 25 years, and I go visit them. And I looked like a baby compared to so many people there because they all have sun damage and don't realize it. And the industries that are available to people to work in Florida are usually met with disdain from New Yorkers because everybody thinks that they're professional and successful and smart. And I have to repeatedly remind people the opportunity is not the same in the Treasure Coast of Florida that it is in New York, greater New York City. So if you got a job working in a supermarket, you respected that job. You were a professional and that was something worthwhile. Or if
Absolutely.
you were a landscaper or anything that it was not traditional office or white collar was looked down on. But I said, these people actually do what they do, and they do it with respect and professionalism. And this is what a good job is. And
Absolutely.
that's people's frame of
And
reference as well.
and you don't look down on that because that's your friend's mom and dad and right, and they're the people that are volunteering at the PTA and it's you realize that you can't take those people in your community for granted. They don't come in and then leave, right? They're there all the time.
That's right. They're very consistent. And I make that distinction with people too, because a lot of people will say predictable. I say consistent. Consistent
Mm,
is reliable. You can trust consistency. Predictable is something that you know is always going to happen, but you have to look at it as a different perspective because you're going to rely on that and you're going to trust that they're going to be there and do that. So that's a very good thing to me for a lot of people, and they need and most people I think need consistency in their life. Otherwise, everything's chaos. So
absolutely.
okay, so based on your saying walk a mile in my shoes and your previous experience, especially at college, which I found fascinating, what would you say, considering where you are now, is your most noteworthy achievement?
Well, just last year, I published my first book, Network Beyond Bias, Making Diversity a Competitive Advantage for Your Career. And I've since published two more books, and I've been a co-author on another one.
Really?
Yes, and it was my lifelong dream to be an author. And, um, I suffer from really debilitating imposter syndrome. So writing one book wasn't enough to prove to me that I could do it. I had to do it a few more times. But I'm really proud of that. That my proudest moment, um, my first really, really, really proud moment was when I pulled up my name on Amazon and there was my picture and my book on Amazon. I was like, this is so cool. But even cooler than that was when I Googled myself and the first thing that came up was Amy C. Waninger, author.
Wow,
And I
that's
was like, oh, I'm Google official. So that made me happy.
takes a lot of diligence, and I imagine a lot of time, relatively solitary to focus.
Well, I hired a coach to help me with the book because I really didn't know how to get started. And it, for me, getting started is the hardest part. If I can get somebody to like get me over that first little hump, I can usually take off and run. And so when I hired her, she put me in a cohort with other writers, and mm, we meet twice a month to write and to talk about the experience of writing. And so that helped it be not lonely at
Okay.
all. And it gave me the right level of support to know that, there's this emotional process that you go through, right? So, like, if you're grieving, you might go to a grief support group because there's a process people go through when they grieve, and it's pretty predictable and
Yep.
consistent, right? and people who are a little bit ahead can help you work through it. And the same is true of writing a book. It's not necessarily a grief process, but there's a lot of vulnerability involved in that. There's a lot of fear, a lot of self-doubt that comes through in that process. And so having some other writers around me that would remind me that that's all part of the process, just keep going, was very valuable.
That's terrific. A support network. Um, Let me ask, since you've just talked about getting over the hump and getting into the writing, um, the biggest personal challenge you have faced, personal injury, a seemingly overwhelming task, personal or professional goal, a difficult situation you had to overcome?
So I've lived a pretty charmed life, I have to tell you. And, y- you know, I'm an only child. Like I said, I'm crazy spoiled. So, and, it's interesting because I recently was a co-author on a book about stories to empower other women. And all these women wrote stories, amazing stories about overcoming hate crimes or, domestic violence or cancer or, these horrible, horrible experiences that they've lived through. And I wrote a chapter about a job interview because that was really, like a turning point in my life was a job interview. And when I read all these other chapters, I thought, oh my gosh, I sound so shallow. Um, but for me, I think self-discovery and kind of growing into my potential has been really difficult because I used to think, well, who am I to do that? And I've had to confront a lot of biases about and frankly against myself and where I came from, to accomplish some of the things that I have. And so it's, just that internal process for me, I think has been the biggest struggle.
Sure. Um, okay, so now this is a question that I ask people, and generally, people have a pretty good story about this. Um, what would you say was a transformational moment in your life? A meaningful gift, a reason to belong to something, being a parent, good job, bad job?
Sure. So, and this keeps in the theme with what we were talking about earlier. So, when I was at this school in Tennessee, I was struggling. I went there. I was a public school kid from Southern Indiana, middle of nowhere, and I had tested out of a bunch of classes. And this school had a policy that if you tested out, you couldn't take the class for credit. So, um, I went in my freshman year. I was taking like third semester calculus, um, third year Spanish, like a whole bunch of really advanced classes my first semester. And I had an 8 o'clock calculus class that I could not stay awake for anything. It was terrible. And I was getting like a C in the class, and to me that was failure. And so um, a young man named Jason, who I had a chemistry class with, said, "Well, I can tutor you in math." And I was like, "Okay." And I hated asking for help, but I couldn't face getting a C in this class. And so we were talking through a problem in the book, and we're working through it. And I said, "Oh," and I kind of finished the proof. And I said, "Is this where you do this and this and this and this and this?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've done this before." And he goes, "When did you do this?" I said, "We did it last year." He goes, "You did this in high school?" I said, "Yeah." And he closed my book and he goes, "I'm not going to tutor you anymore." And I said, "Why?" I was like, "I'm getting a C in this class." He goes, "Yeah, but you're getting a C because you think you should be getting a C. And now you need to understand that you should be getting an A in this class because it's all review for you.
Ah,
And you don't have any excuses."
okay.
And I sat there stunned. I was like, "But you have to help me with this class." And he's like, "No, no, I don't." He's like, "The only thing keeping you from an A in this class is you." And it was the biggest gift he could have given me because I was so in my own way. And I think about that all the time when I get in my own way.
So and this is a question that I've heard people give me very different answers, and everything from coffee to my alarm clock. But other people have told me what's their motivation. What drives you? What gets you up in the morning?
Oh gosh. So the two driving forces in my career especially are who can I help and what will I learn?
Okay.
And if I'm helping people and learning along the way, I can't sleep at night because I'm so excited.
Well, that's awesome.
So that's what I'm trying to orient my life around, is helping other people and learning as much as I can.
That's neat. Um, so based on that, what's the first thing you want to come to people's minds when they think of you?
Um, networking.
Networking?
Networking. So the book that I wrote, Network Beyond Bias, is really about how to connect with people who are different from you in a meaningful way so that you can create opportunity for yourself and others.
Awesome. Now, this is a good question too, because everybody has their own. What is your Zen?
Oh, my Zen is um, when I get in some sort of a flow with work where, maybe I'm writing an article for a blog post, or I'm solving a problem, or I'm just organizing, my desk or my thoughts or whatever it is. If I can just lose myself in that for just a little bit, and then all this time passes and I forget to check social media and I forget to do all the things that distract me, right? If I could just be in the moment of solving a problem or accomplishing a task, makes me so happy.
Now, this is a question that I have very different answers from a lot of people, and some people say they haven't gotten there yet. But some people have told me very specific answers to this question. This is the threshold. Everyone's crossed the threshold in their life. That means there's no going back. And how did you know when you arrived there? How did it feel to cross it? What was the significance to you? What did you leave behind? What are you glad you left behind? And what do you regret leaving behind if you didn't know?
Oh boy, that's such a big question.
Yes, it is.
The I think the so I tend to look at my journey as a series of thresholds.
Okay.
And there are kind of these milestones along the way. I think once I saw myself as a leader, there was no going back for me. I felt that responsibility very seriously. And I realized that leadership wasn't about the title that I had, it was about who I am and how I show up.
Really? Huh.
And I think once I understood that, there was no going back for me, um, in terms of thinking of myself and showing up in a way that others would see me as a leader. And that's actually where the name of my company came from. My company is Lead at Any Level. And I really believe that everybody has that capacity within them. So I would say that's one of the thresholds that I've crossed.
So, can I ask you, what advice would you give to somebody who's interested in becoming a leader? Do you think it's something that's inborn in people, and you need to develop it, or how would you describe the process of recognizing leadership traits and developing them?
Well, I would start with, what is it that you want to do? So if you're there because if you want to be a leader because you want to help other people, I think that's probably the right starting point. If you want to be a leader because of the money or the power or the prestige that comes with that, I think you're going to find yourself always wanting, um, for more than you're going to get from that role. Because the truth is, it's not that much more money. There's not very much power, and the prestige is only as good as you are. So,
Okay.
people will only trust you if you're trustworthy, and people will only believe in you if you believe in them. And um, so I think you just have to get into it. I think you have to be a leader for the right reasons. Um, Leadership is not one skill; it's a set of skills, and you know, I hate the term soft skills because it's about people, right? It's about your relationships with people and keeping your word. Um, so there's all of that, but then there's also being forward thinking and looking ahead and planning for the future and being resilient. And there are just so many components of leadership, and they're all learnable, just like any other skill we take to work with us every day is learnable. Nobody's born with this. Um, and everything that you've done so far, you've had to learn to do, right? From your first steps and your first words on. And so, leadership is no different, and it requires um, practice and commitment and, rededication and evolution and humility all along the way.
So I think I'm here also. The word that's being used very popularly these days is authenticity.
Yes.
Now, we're going to go, that was the end of my 10 questions.
Oh.
And we're going to go to yours. And we're going to go, the first question is, what do others not know about you?
Well, one of the things that not a lot of people know about me is that I have had really severe depression since I was about 7 years old. It was undiagnosed until I was in my 20s. And I have been on medication since then to battle depression and anxiety. People think, oh, but you're so outgoing and you're so friendly and you smile a lot. I'm like, yeah, but you don't see me on the days that, I'm crying and I can't get out of bed. So, and the reason I share that is not so people will say, oh, that's so terrible for you. It's because I want people to realize that it's not always who you think that might be suffering from mental illness. It's not always people that you think that might be having suicidal thoughts. It's not, when someone seems happy, it doesn't mean that they're really happy. And, there are a lot of people in this country, especially that are struggling with mental illness, with anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, any number of mental illnesses. And there's so much stigma about talking about that they're not likely to come forward. It's a coming out process all of its own. And so I share that when I can, because I want people to understand that you don't always know what someone's going through, that there certainly should be no shame in having a condition like that. And if there's somebody out there who needs to get help, please, please, please get help, because there is help out there to be had.
It's funny. I leapt at the when you said the word stigma, because I think that's one of the things that I think emotionally cripples people from looking for help, is they're afraid of the stigma. And I've had a substantial number of guests on the show who have all suffered from depression, and everything from something manifesting itself in an eating disorder, another one having emotional issues, family, parents, and other people having and everybody has, to some, I think, some degree, some sort of issue. But there's a few people who had this, and I think it's very brave for many people to come out and share this, and I think it's very necessary. And we have to remove that stigma, and we have to let people know that this is, it's not a failing, and it's not something you can predict, and you can't talk someone out of it.
Right.
So, let's all adjust our thinking, and let's all move forward, because it's a lot more prevalent in people's lives than you think. And we always think the people who take a self-destructive action, so many of them, say, but they were just so happy, and that they're putting on a brave face all the time.
Yeah.
And there's a struggle, and I think that needs to be recognized. So
thank you.
You're very welcome. And I know it's a little bit of an odd juxtaposition, but is there anything you want to do that you haven't got to yet that peers all have under their belts?
Yeah. So I started about a year ago into an MBA program, and I'm doing it online. It's correspondence. It's wonderful. I'm really enjoying it, but I feel so far behind because, like I said, I thought people went to business school to be bank tellers and secretaries, and I had no clue. And so I felt like for me, this was like one of those internal hurdles that I needed to clear to be confident having conversations with people who are executives at big companies and that sort of thing. And to feel like, like sometimes I'll think, well, who am I to run my own business? And this was one of those things that I thought, well, you know what? I can prove to myself that I've got what it takes to do this. And so, people said, well, you don't really need an MBA. And I'm like, I know I don't need one for you to take me seriously, but I need one for me to take me seriously. And so that's something that I've taken on for myself.
That's a big motivator. I can see that. This is a good question. Now, this is usually fun. What did you grow up misperceiving? Song lyrics, geography, scientific fact, an aspect of human nature?
So many things, so many things. Okay, so I've already told you about the college thing, so that was one. But here's the fun one. So when I was little, so I'm 40 years old right now, and when I was little, Dukes of Hazzard was big on TV, right? Like big. And I remember my parents had this like light blue Volkswagen Rabbit about the same time that Dukes of Hazzard was big on TV. And there was a button on the dash that said Hazard. And I always wanted to press it because I thought it would make the car jump like the General Lee did on the Dukes of Hazzard because they were always jumping and ramping off and stuff, right? And so I would always ask, can I press the hazard button? Can I press the hazard button? And my parents were like, no, you can't press the hazard button. And I was so disappointed for so long until I found out all it did was make the clicky lights. And I was so bummed.
That's great. So it's a good question. A lot of people have told me this too. What is your favorite color and why?
I love red.
Really?
Red. Everything red. So internet marketers, if you're listening, I always think when I see something scroll, like I'm scrolling on Facebook or something, and and if I've been on somebody's website recently and they put a product up that I was maybe looking at, I'm like, if you want me to buy it, put it in red because my eye goes right to it and I want it every time I see something red. And if you put the blue one up there, I don't click. If you put the brown one up, I don't click, but I will click on the red one about 9 times out of 10.
I think that is a known quantity. Actually, you know that. I think that there's a psychological factor to that. I think the red box. I think is used in it's a psychological tool. I think so. I think it's interesting that you said that. It's neat.
When I was coming up with the branding for my company, and I got the logo and everything done, and I said I want it to be red, and a colleague of mine, she looked at it. She said, well, a lot of times men are decision makers around things like this. And, a lot of men are colorblind and that's not, and red's not a good color to stick in their memory and whatever. And she's telling me this and it's like, okay, but it's good enough for Coca-Cola and ESPN. So I think I'm okay.
Yeah. Oh, I think I remember where this was. This is one of those things where men wear red, they're considered more attractive.
Really?
Because men don't wear red a lot.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
I always put my kids in red. I love red. Love it.
Neat. So you have so much to talk about, and you were discussing.
That was a very nice way of saying I don't shut up, Tim.
No,
I like that.
No, not at all. I mean, I love a good conversation. Please. That's not. I just said because this question has so much to do with where you came from and what you were just previously talking about. Do you have a mentor or role model?
Oh, I have so many mentors and role models. And I try to choose them to be as different as possible because I want mentors for different aspects of what I want to be, but also for things that I can't even imagine being. And so to me, a mentor is not just someone that you sit down and talk to on a regular basis, although that's important, having a two-way relationship. But, I have a whole library of books. And when you read a book, you can choose your mentor from all of human history.
Yeah.
Right? Social media, you can choose a mentor that doesn't even know that you exist anywhere in the world in real time. And it's amazing. So, I have so many mentors, so many people that I look to as role models that I admire the way they phrase certain things, the way they think about certain things, the way they structure, their work or their lives or their relationships or their conversations. And I try to learn from as many people as I can.
Very good. So based on that, what should everyone know about you?
Oh gosh, I think what everybody should know about me is that I am still learning. Um, I get introduced a lot as an expert, a leadership expert, a diversity and inclusion expert. And I think that word it's very flattering and, it's wonderful when someone says that about you, that you're an expert in something. But I think that also kind of draws a line between you and the people that you want to talk to and that you want to teach. And I think what people need to understand is that just because someone has this moniker where other people are saying this about them maybe, or even if they're saying it about themselves, they're still learning. Experts are always still learning because the knowledge changes, right? The context changes. And so the more you understand that expertise is really just about refining and evolving your own learning, I think the more accessible and approachable those people become to you.
Interesting. I had a boss. He hired me, I think, twice, um, and he is a technological. He's a pioneer. He's not an early adopter. He's beyond early adopter, and he is considered a. I won't say subject matter expert, but because he won't consider himself a subject matter expert, he's constantly in a state of evolution. I mean, he introduces, he adapts, and implements, and he grows, and he adds constantly. And he has, he's a very, very sharp, very bright intellect, and he absorbs so much all the time. So I'd have to think, yeah, that's pretty neat. Is that as you are, I would have to say, I'd have to agree with that assessment. You are constantly learning, if you, especially if you're going to be, allow yourself to be considered an expert. So, considering where you are right now, is there anything you struggle with that you wish you did not?
Oh gosh, I wish that I wish I didn't struggle with depression because it would save so much time and energy. And I wish I didn't struggle with imposter syndrome because I imagine what I could accomplish if I could just believe from minute one that I could do it rather than, spend the first month trying to talk myself out of why I can't do it. But, I think that I'm incredibly blessed and just incredibly lucky in that I have this amazing support network of people around me. I have such an awesome family that just, they celebrate all my wins with me, and they don't let me sit still too long or kind of rest on my successes. I have to keep going, and they just believe in me so much. And I think, you know, if I have to struggle with the things that I struggle with, I'm so glad that I have the support system in place to keep me grounded, but also to keep me moving forward.
So now, considering what you said, how do you know when you have connected with someone?
So I look at it as kind of a degree of separation connection is my litmus test. So if I've really connected with someone, I'm going to walk away from a conversation or walk away from that interaction knowing in my mind, this is who I need to introduce this person to next.
Huh.
And if I can make a good introduction, I know that I really understood who they were. And similarly, if someone makes a good introduction for me, I know that I was really good at explaining who I am, what I do, how I can help, and that they were really listening. And so I think making those next step connections is a great way to show that you've really connected with somebody and you're extending some of your credibility to them and vice versa.
Okay, that's really fascinating. Now, this one is another one. Everyone has an opinion on this, and myself included. It's a light question. What's your favorite weather?
Oh, my favorite weather is right in the middle of fall when it's about 70-ish degrees and sunny in Indiana, but the leaves have already started to turn, and you can go for a run without breaking like a horrible sweat, and you're not freezing to death and just like jeans and a t-shirt during the day. And then in the evening, you get to put on a sweatshirt and sit around a campfire. That is like the perfect weather day for me.
Okay. Vast majority of people have shared your opinion.
I would imagine. I also
Um,
love that first day of spring when you can roll the windows down
yes.
and kind of turn the radio up and feel like you did on the last day of school. Like that's a great day too. But that fall day is just, I live for that.
If it's frigid, I don't like it, the cold, but I like it between. I always say it could be between 39 and 63 degrees, and I never complain. Okay, so we're getting to the last question, and it's really fascinating. But I'd like to know this question because you're the first person who've ever asked this. The biggest boost to your self-esteem.
Oh, this is my favorite story ever. Okay, so there is a woman who is kind of if I had to pick one role model for what I'm doing and how I want to do it and how I want to show up in the world, it would be her. And I'm gonna name drop if that's okay. Her name is Jennifer Brown, and she is a very successful diversity and inclusion consultant to the Fortune 100. She's incredible. She's the host of a podcast. She's written a couple of books. Just unbelievable woman. And I met her when I was kind of formulating this idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to speak. I wanted to start my own business. And within about 4 seconds of meeting her, she said, "Well, what do you do?" And I told her, I said, "But I want to do what you do, but I want to do it like this." And she just looked at me. She goes, "You totally should."
No.
And I mean, we had just like exchanged business cards and that was it. So, but that's not the story. The story is that a year and a half later, she and I ended up at the same conference where she was giving a keynote and I was doing a workshop on the same day. And I saw her, I passed her in the hallway and she said, "I'm coming to your workshop." And I thought, oh my gosh, like here's my, like my superstar idol, right? Like showing up at my thing. And she came in just a couple of minutes after it started and she sat down in the back. And a couple times I glanced over and I saw her writing some stuff down. I was like, oh, she's working, but she's here. And how awesome is that? And I got through the workshop and, it was full room and it was great. And I got down off the stage and I talked to a couple people and she came over to me and she said, "I couldn't stop taking notes."
Wow.
And I just about died. And then
Wow.
she said to me, Tim, this is what she said to me. Because I was talking about diversity and inclusion and the importance of that in your networking and, basically like my kind of standard conference talk. And she said to me, "We need you out here every day talking to people about this." And I've never been nervous in front of an audience since.
Really?
Really,
That's
because I thought, well, if I mean, she knows, right? She knows because this is what she does and she's been doing it for years. And when she said that to me, there was just she's given me so many amazing gifts, but that one was just tops.
Well, I would say that that's probably very, very, very nice. It would make you feel real warm and cuddly on the inside.
It totally did. She's an amazingly generous person, but it was um but knowing that about her didn't dampen the impact of her statement at all for me.
Well, that's terrific. So I'm going to wrap this up to give you your hour, the rest of it's last 3 minutes of your hour back to you. Again, I want to thank you very much for being part of the show. And I'm going to end it as I always end, as I say every show. Thank you very much. And as the kiddies say, peace out.